And I thought, you know what? I just want to get on with my life. I forgive him. I forgive her. Not my problem anymore. And I remember the feeling of joy. I literally skipped through the day with this feeling of something that had just joined me, which I described as this feeling of grace.
I'm your host, Eileen Boris, and I'd like to welcome you to Political Forgiveness Voices of Peace, a podcast of hope where forgiveness and political forgiveness intersect to create a better world. I am so excited to introduce my guest, Mary Noble. She's the co-founder and CEO of Feminenza, a nonprofit organization which had its beginnings in 2000 with a gathering of some 400 women from all corners of the world working towards a greater mutuality between genders, the long-term development of women, their roles in leadership and society, and their partnership with men to establish a more humane and peaceful world. Through Feminenza, Mary gives training programs in forgiveness, and her work in teaching about forgiveness is extraordinary. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you very much, Eileen.
My first question for you is, how did you come to the work of forgiveness, and what makes you so passionate about forgiveness?
I think where I had my first epiphany about forgiveness was very personal. I was about 33 years old. I was married, and my husband just announced one day that he was leaving. For 6 months, I was in shock. I hadn't seen it coming. I was furious. I remember waking up every day in distress and pain and found out he'd gone off with somebody else. I was angry at him. I was angry at her. And this went on for 6 months. Then I remember vividly one night having a dream. And in my dream, he'd come back. And I was thinking, oh no, he's come back. Now we're going to have to go through all the difficulties that we were going through again. And then I woke up the next morning. I thought, oh no, that was just a dream. And so I realized in that moment that I needed to move on. And what happened in the course of that day was this word forgiveness just landed in me. And I thought, you know what? I just want to get on with my life. I forgive him. I forgive her. Not my problem anymore. And I remember the feeling of joy. I literally skipped through the day with this feeling of something that had just joined me, which I described as this feeling of grace. So that was my first real meeting with forgiveness. Fast forward 20 years, I'm now working with Feminenza, doing workshops, now in my early 50s. And I started to find that when I was working with people about development and relationships, this issue of forgiveness kept coming up. I remember one man standing up one day and saying, I was hurt by my first girlfriend so badly that I've never been able to forgive women since. He was stuck in that place. Similar things were being said to me by various people. I kept going home and thinking, I really need to develop my understanding about this issue of forgiveness because I got a bit of education when I was a kid at school. That's about it. And it didn't feel sufficient to address the kind of real nitty-gritty issues and struggles that people were presenting me with. So it prompted me to go on what I describe as a kind of 2-year journey of learning about forgiveness from scratch. I read everything I could find. I found an extraordinary website called The Forgiveness Project. There was stories about forgiveness. And I kept asking these questions of myself. And it was like I would have these arguments with myself for days. Well, is it fair? Why should I forgive? What about the perpetrator? Aren't you just allowing them to get away with it? And so all of these issues that would come up, I would argue and argue with myself. And then I would ask people. I would reach out to people. And I started to make contact with some of the people, the stories who I'd read on this website, for example, from the Parents Circle, or a lady called Anne Gallagher in Ireland. Every time I would interview somebody, I would try and understand what exactly is forgiveness. This was an ongoing process in me until I got to the point where I finally realized it's not just about me. It's not just about me being able to let go of something. This is much bigger than that. I began to realize how, as a society, as a human race, lack of forgiveness is enshrined in what we consider the right way to go on. Vendetta, tit for tat, payback. You don't let somebody get away with it. And I began to see that this is so ingrained. We were all brought up with paradigms that this is the right thing to do, even down to protecting the family's honor and honor killing and all those kind of things. I began to think, wow, this is an issue that affects the whole human race, and our ability to actually evolve, to actually move on, to actually become better than we were. It's one of the things that stops us. And then just at this point, I visited Kenya. I'd been invited there by some friends who wanted to learn about Feminenza. That was really the next big moment for me because I met this extraordinary Congolese pastor called Emmanuel who worked at the UN. We were talking about having a 4-day conference at the UN in Nairobi, which Feminenza was going to host. The theme was humanity and gender. It was about having people speaking who were trying to do extraordinary work in East Africa, helping men and women in various ways. I remember sitting down with Emmanuel and he said, Mary, let me tell you about the Congo. He pulled out photographs and put them on the table in front of me, and they were all photographs of mutilated bodies. I was like, what am I looking at here, Emmanuel? He said, you're looking at the result of the civil war in the Congo. A lot of my family and friends were part of that. He said that this complete lack of forgiveness in the political realm in the Congo has gone on generation after generation, leader after leader. Each one comes into power and massacres everybody who was there before. He said, I think, Mary, forgiveness is the only way out of this. Would you do something on that at this conference? I thought, okay. Somehow, petition from Emmanuel convinced me to do a whole day on forgiveness at this 4-day conference with about 300 delegates from East Africa. And what struck me, Eileen, was how many people came up to me afterwards about that particular day and that particular issue, and how important it was for them to hear an alternative voice they'd never heard before. It wasn't just me speaking, it was Emmanuel, it was others, but they'd never heard people talking about forgiveness as a real option, as a valid choice, even though most of them had been brought up as Christians, but none of that had percolated into their actual daily living life somehow. I then got invited to start doing some workshops in Nairobi with young men and women refugees from Rwanda and Burundi who'd been in the genocide there. So we started doing work on the role of forgiveness in reconciliation, the role of forgiveness in healing, and some extraordinary stories came out of that. It was almost like something was setting me up for the moment when this huge explosion happened in Kenya in early 2008. There was post-election violence, contested elections, politicians stirred everything up, and the whole thing blew up. Ethnic hatred, thousands of people died, hundreds of thousands were displaced, homes, villages destroyed. By that time, I had good friends in Kenya. I remember going there a few weeks after this post-election violence and sat down in this room with a group of women. And they said, Mary, is there any way that Feminenza could put together some kind of training program to help us heal our communities? They said the problem is that the men can't do it. They are too invested in the violence that's just taken place. They've got blood on their hands. This was communities being torn apart. This was neighbors. This was people living on two sides of the street. So they said, we think that as mothers and as women, we stand a chance. We can reach out to each other, kind of a bit under the radar, but we need help. We need to know how to start the conversation. How do we start that process of healing? So again, it was a petition I couldn't ignore. And I spent a year with my team working, thinking, how could we put something together? Kept going and knocking at the door of the UN for funding. I remember month after month, I would turn up there and knock on people's doors. Eventually, we got funding for a 2-year program from UN Women under the mantle of UN Security Council Resolution 1325. Essentially, it was a resolution that all countries had signed up to try and help women have a better chance of sitting at the peace table, and especially grassroots women. It was a lovely thing that had been signed by various countries, but not much was actually happening. So we turned up and said, look, we're willing to go out there and work with women if you fund us. They gave us some money. We had to go and interview dozens of women, and we ended up with 25 extraordinary women all along the Rift Valley of Kenya, all who were deeply committed to trying to bring healing to their communities. They were teachers, health workers, community elders, a whole range of different women. With each one, we would interview them, travel to their community, sit down and meet the people in their project. We would talk to their local district commissioner, their local elders, because we needed to get the men on board in each case. Will you back this woman if she comes and does this 1-year project with us? Will you support her? Will you be there to watch her back? One by one, all these lovely chiefs came on board, and I ended up with a mobile phone with 20 mobile phone numbers that I could ring at any moment if suddenly something began to go wrong. The passion for it, Eileen, has grown over the years as I've seen the results, as I've discovered what happens, what it causes in people's lives, the change. Every one of those women became literally a pillar of forgiveness. Many of them I'm still in touch with today. We have a chapter, Feminenza Kenya, and they are the trustees of that. And I just met 2 of them in Greece. They were able to come to Greece to the last event I did there. Each one of them had to take on a project during this 2-year program. So I was thinking, which of the many stories could I tell you about that? One of them that I loved was the story of a lady called Pacifica. Her project was that she lived in a community where the 2 clans had not spoken to each other for a couple of years because the youth of one clan had gone and vandalized the water pipes so that the other clan could no longer get access to water. They had to go back to the river, which meant the women had to go to the river and fetch the water. And this had been a kind of stalemate for 2 or 3 years. This whole water system had been lovingly installed by Swedish International Development Aid, and no one had dared go back to Sweden and go, but we're really sorry, but we have a problem. So basically, there was no water. Pacifica took on board that she was going to rally both sides. First, she went to speak to the women, and she started to pass on some of the education that we'd given her about forgiveness and about not allowing the cycle of revenge with that. And that was quite a profound piece of education that was important for her and for the other women. She managed to get the women to persuade the men to come together. And I was present. We had this amazing meeting one day in this forest, this big circle of trees, where they signed a peace treaty with Pacifica standing up, which was very unusual in that society because women did not talk to the men in that way. But they all respected her. She got up, they all nodded and signed. From that point on, the pipes were rebuilt. They went on to work together. They built a sugar factory. The youth got employment, and it continues to this day. So that was just one example. The outplay was different in every case. There was one lady who was a teacher, and for her, the way she put the forgiveness work into practice was to go back to the school where there were students from different tribes whose parents had been killing each other. And she started a peace club, empowered with the education about the cycle of revenge and violence, and it doesn't help anybody. And how do you heal from that? And how do you start to see humanity in each other? For me, that quality of humanity is a crucial element in this work on forgiveness. And I went to visit her school one day, and the kids all put on this amazing theater with all these different scenarios. They were just amazing. They were creative. They were inspiring. And it was all about not continually just living out the cycle from their parents, which they'd all adopted without thinking, which is Kikuyus are bad or Kalenjins are thieves. And I used to sit and laugh with these women and go, so what do you really think about Kikuyus? And she'd go, we're all brought up to think that they're all thieves. I said, have you met any thieves here? She said, no, I haven't. I said, exactly. We would laugh about the nonsense with which we're all imbued. Because I said, look, this isn't unique to Kenya. Trust me. Grew up in England where they had that idea about the Irish. If you go to Vietnam, they'll say the same thing about the Chinese. Everywhere you go in the world, there is this us and them thing. But we're better than that. So loads of stories I could tell you, Eileen, but that were a few examples there.
We think that forgiveness is about letting somebody else off the hook. And when you began to share your story, it was like, okay, I can forgive my ex. I can forgive her. This is about me and my inner healing. And that's that moment of grace when we can finally let go of our anger and our pain.
Yeah, exactly.
How can communities come together so we can heal us and them? This is how forgiveness becomes political. Do you want to say more on that?
I think one of the key ingredients, Eileen, that I've found is that people need help. There's a certain kind of healing of the heart that is important, because I can talk about forgiveness all day long to somebody, but if they are carrying certain kind of wounds in them, then it's water off a duck's back. It doesn't land. So one of the, for me, importances of the sort of the workshops that we do is to create an ecology that is so warm and human and without judgment that it can give somebody the opportunity to release some of the things that holding on to make space for forgiveness. In 2015, after we'd finished working with the women, we were invited back by a charity called Global Communities based in the US, but working in Kenya. And they'd heard about our work and they said, could we do a 1 week trauma healing program based on all this work that we were doing for community leaders they were working with at the time. Now, the community leaders was a bit of a euphemism in the sense that they were community leaders, but they were also mostly ex-gang leaders from the settlements of Nairobi. And their concern was the radicalization of youth. At that time, that was a big deal with ISIS and Al-Qaeda and stuff going on. And they could see young people getting drawn into these things. They were running this project to try and help these community leaders work with these youth, and felt that we could do something that would be helpful. So I went along, we turned up, and we had these 30 community leaders. What I realized right from the start was how many of them were frozen in their own fear, pain, guilt, and shame, and all the things that they had stuck in their lives that needed an opportunity to be let go of. From the very first day, we have a process in the run up to the work on forgiveness, which is to help people first identify their fears and then identify their qualities as a preparation to walk through that door of forgiveness. So the first day, it was thinking about looking at that the whole workshop about finding out what their fears are. And I remember this one guy, really tough guy called Clive, lovely guy. Yeah, whatever, I can do this. This is not a big deal for me. And he walked into this field where we had all these fears on little cards. The idea was that you'd walk around and see if any triggered in you and you'd come out. And he came out shaking like a leaf. I said, Clive, are you okay? He said, I've just seen a fear that I've managed to bury for a few years, written on a card. He said, it's my fear of the anger of God. And I looked at him and I said, why is that such a big deal for you, Clive? And he said, I'm a Muslim. He said, I've done such unspeakable things in my gang life. Although I've dedicated my life to helping young people, I know I am beyond forgiveness. There's no way God could ever forgive me. He said, that is my real terror. I try not to think about it. I've tried not to think about it for years. And now suddenly there it is in black and white. He was ready to pack up and run and go home. So I said, Clive, don't go, stay. I promise you, that's the worst bit. It's going to get better from here on in. So he stayed. Then I observed him for 3 days. What I do, Eileen, is I try and consciously notice every single attribute, every single quality, every single thing about a person when I'm working with them. I consciously make a note of it. And by about the third day, I looked at Clive. I said, Clive, how are you doing? How's this going? Are you getting anywhere? And he said, Mary, to be honest, when I look at myself in the mirror, all I see is this fat, middle-aged, balding loser. Those were his exact words. And I looked at him and I said, Clive, I said, let me tell you what I see when I look at you. I see humanity. I see humility. I see courage. I see compassion. I see love. I see honesty. I see perseverance. I see endurance. I see patience. I listed back to him everything that I had seen in that man over 3 days. He was always the first in the room. He was always willing to help people. He always had his hand up. He was always throwing his heart into what he was doing. But nobody had ever held up a mirror to him and said, Clive, this is who you actually are. And there was something that happened because of the whole setup, the process that we'd been together for a few days. It got past all his barriers. And I could feel this moment of melting, which I've seen so many times in these processes. Like something in him just melted, like it landed. It like he was introduced to the truth of himself, to the best of himself, to the goodness of himself. And nobody had ever done that in his entire life. So he sat down quietly and I could see something was shifting. And then on the very last day, at the very end, he put up his hand. He said, could I read something? I could just read you a few sentences from what he read out. He said, an elixir is what you guys are, a gift from God with a simple message of forgiveness, yet with far-reaching impact on our personal lives. You have taught me to heal. I will teach others. You have given me belief. I will propagate that belief. You've taught me forgiveness. I have forgiven. I will forgive. I hope I will be forgiven. But it doesn't really matter because I have let go. I'm a clean slate. I can write a new chapter. Thank you.
There's so many different levels of forgiveness, from the very pragmatic of, I'm going to let go of my anger and guilt. I'm not going to give this situation any more rental space in my mind, to I can now see this a little bit differently, and I can connect with our humanity. And that inner connection becomes very powerful. That what I see in you is what I also know is in me, because we're all part of this human condition. And then it goes deeper to, okay, now I understand what it really means to love, because I can see you in your beauty and entirety. And that's the profound work of forgiveness.
Beautifully put. One of the things that I often said to myself, and I said in that situation as well in that week, was I'll say it out loud to people. I say, I don't care what you've done. I don't care who you once were. I'm not interested in any of that. I said, the only thing that matters to me is the person standing in front of me today and who you are trying to become. I can't stand the way the world tears people up. They'll go back and they'll dig something up from their past and hang it in front of them. And that's not my way. I try and create an environment, an ecology where people go, okay, I don't have to hide. I don't have to try and pretend to be something I'm not. Look, we've all screwed up. We've all done stupid things. We've all done shitty things. Not on the scale of some of these guys. The stories they were telling were, pretty hair-raising. But the important thing was that in that period of time, they could feel the love, the real love of their humanness. Because that's what people have done for me. When I've been in difficult times, struggled with something that I feel I've really screwed up or done something really stupid, to have one person who will sit there with you and go, Mary, look, whatever that was, whatever that is, that doesn't define you. That's not the totality of who you are. A good person, this and this. People have done that for me in the past. I remember once years ago when I was in the depths of despondency after that first divorce and I wasn't making any headway with my life and feeling I was all alone. One day this letter arrived in the post from a friend who I knew, an acquaintance, not that well. She wrote me this extraordinary 5-page letter telling me about all the things she valued about me. I remember sitting there. I couldn't believe that somebody had taken the trouble to write this letter to me. But it made such a profound impact on me. It made me go, oh my God, it's still worth trying. It's still worth another day. And moments like that, I think, have been part of what have been woven into the work that I now do, which is that I try to recreate that for other people, for other lives, to go right here, right now, you're in a safe space and you are valued and you are appreciated for who you are. And from there, it's, as you said, that forgiveness starts to become something people can access. So it's all connected in this strange way.
That's so beautiful. What a beautiful testimony to the work that you do. And it is so true.
If you've still got a minute, I'd love to share this. I got this letter from one of the young women from Israel. When she arrived, she works for a charity in Tel Aviv called Women's Spirit, Ruach Nashid. She was like a grey ghost when she arrived. She was very down. This is what she wrote to us the day after she left. She said, Dear Feminenza team and friends, after completing a full week of your incredible seminar in Greece, I wanted to express my deepest appreciation to your devotion and your wise techniques for making me feel so at peace. You helped me open a window into my soul that was closed shut for longer than I wished to recall. Your beautiful process was right on time for me in my truly busy and hectic life. I haven't even realized that I needed it if I wished to flourish and not simply survive. I found myself in tears of joy and understanding of myself as the days progressed. I felt the pillars of resilience and forgiveness pierce through my heart and soul. It came as a surprise to me after all. I thought I've seen and heard it all. I'm eternally grateful to you for taking me through this journey of love, acceptance, and warmth. I only wish that one day I'll be able to pass it forward and create a real difference in this crazy world.
I remember when I was sitting in on some of the programs, the heartfelt expressions were so prominent. What would you like to leave the audience with?
One is that forgiveness is a journey. This is something I always say to people. It's not something you have to do or you must do or you do it in one big step. You can forgive something today and tomorrow the pain is back again. It's a wonderful journey and you can take one step, you can take 2 steps, you can take 5 steps, and it's entirely up to you. The other is, the way I look at it for me, is every time I reach for forgiveness, it's like giving myself permission to be joyful again. Every single time, it's like almost every day, if I have to reach for it, I go, you know what? I'm allowed to feel joy. It's okay. And there was one tiny thing from the retreat in Greece when we were working with these youth workers from Europe and the Middle East. There was this young woman from Kosovo. She, at the age of 10, had been caught up in the civil war in Kosovo. Her family had to flee to Albania. Her father was taken away, never came back. He was killed by the Serb militia. She went through terrible trauma, returned to Kosovo, grew up, went to university, met a wonderful professor who helped her with psychology and philosophy. And now, at the age of 35, runs a trauma center for survivors of sexual violence from that war. And she told us her story and said, the thing that I came to was that my father, who I loved, and she showed us this amazing photograph of her and her father when she was only 9 years old, he would not want me to suffer. He would not want me to live a life of grief and sadness because he was killed. She said, I know without a shadow of a doubt that he would want me to live the fullest life I can, the best life I can. For me, it's a really important message, which is we don't have to live a life of regret and sadness on behalf of people who have passed or who have suffered. If they loved us, they would not want that for us. They would want us to thrive. They would want us to reach for that joy.
Mary, if people wanted to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Best way is the email address is forgiveness@feminenza.org. We are planning to do a series of online workshops on the 7 pillars of forgiveness later this year. If people interested, want to know about that, they can email us at that email address, and we'll put them on the mailing list.
And that's a wonderful training program. I hope people take advantage of what you have to offer. And all this information will be on the website and in the show notes. Thank you so very much, Mary. The wisdom that you've shared is incredible.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you for joining us in listening to Political Forgiveness, Voices of Peace, where I hope you were inspired by the work of forgiveness in creating social change. If you know of anyone who would find this episode helpful, please share it. For more information on political forgiveness, please visit my website, drboris.com, where you can find all the resources mentioned in the podcast, as well as sign up for the newsletter with the latest information on political forgiveness.